The Atlanta Braves are heading to the winter meetings where they find out if Dale Murphy makes the Hall of Fame and what draft pick they'll have in next year's first round. Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on into a special live edition of Braves Today for Friday, December 5th. This is your source for news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsey Crosby. You can follow me on social media at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on X Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and an Instagram as well. You can find all of my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. We're proudly part of the Believe Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app today to get started. Last show of the week, wanted to go live on YouTube. Thank you to everybody who's here already in this. Simply because I want to kind of go over, one, everything we know is going to happen at the winter meetings, which start on Sunday afternoon. That's like the welcome reception. Monday's really the first day of that. As well as answering your questions about what you want to know about the winter meetings, about what to expect next week and things like that. I've been to the winter meetings multiple times. Unfortunately, I will not be there this year. One of the big regrets I have is not being able to make it to this year's winter meetings. But it stands to be a big, big week for the Atlanta Braves. And the two things I want to talk about specifically in this is Dale Murphy's Hall of Fame candidacy and the draft lottery and the range of what can happen for Atlanta, like how logistics of how this works so that we understand the odds of these different picks and what can happen. So let's start with Murphy. Dale Murphy is, I'm hoping this is the year that he gets inducted to the Hall of Fame. What is happening is the National Baseball Hall of Fame's era committee will be voting on Sunday afternoon. We will find out Sunday night, 7:30 p.m. live on MLB Network, if they've elected anybody. The process for this is not the standard Hall of Fame election. This is, in this case, this year, it's the contemporary era, which is what the Hall of Fame considers players whose primary contributions to the game came after 1980. These are all players that have already fallen off the main ballot. So Andrew Jones, still on the Hall of Fame ballot, he's not eligible in this. This is all players who have already been removed from that ballot. Gary Sheffield is on this ballot. 2 seasons with the Braves, 02 and 03, 319 batting average, 64 bombs, was great, short thing. But the bigger deal here, obviously, Dale Murphy. And a lot of the common sentiment around Dale Murphy has started to turn in his favor. I think some of this is players who were not quite at his level being in the Hall of Fame. Harold Baines is a great example of that. But the other part of it is when you look at the entirety of Dale Murphy's numbers, he ends up being one of the most dominant players in the 1980s. And while he didn't have the longevity, he definitely had the peak. And as we've seen a new look of baseball where guys are not playing for as many years, not getting as many opportunities for wins for pitchers and things like that, voters are starting to be more open to peaks versus longevity. So for those of you who don't know the full backstory behind Dale Murphy, debuted in 1976 with the Braves, age 20, moved to the outfield in 1980. So 4 seasons with the Braves before he moved to the outfield. He was a catcher. He struggled with throwing the ball back to the pitcher. He kind of like picked up a thing of the yips. They tried him at first. Bobby Cox put him in the outfield starting in 1980. From 1980 through 1987, so an 8-season span, Dale Murphy hit 284 with an 891 OPS. He averaged 33 home runs a year, 96 RBI, 16 stolen bases. He was a 7-time All-Star. He won 5 consecutive Gold Gloves, 4 consecutive Silver Sluggers, 2 back-to-back MVP awards, and the Roberto Clemente Award for being, in essence, the best person in the league, right? Like the best humanitarian representative of the game in baseball. If you go back and you look at the entire decade by the numbers, Dale Murphy leads the whole decade in total bases. He's second in the decade in homers. He had the 10th highest WAR among all position players in the decade. And the weird thing about that, everybody else in the top 13 in WAR in the decade has already been inducted in the Hall of Fame. So Dale Murphy, it can be argued, has not gotten the same recognition for what he's done that his contemporaries did. But the flip side of the argument for Dale Murphy, and what a lot of people cite, is the rapid fall off that he experienced. He had a couple knee injuries. He finally had knee surgery before, I believe, the 1988 season. From 1988, his age 32 year, through when he retired, he only once hit over 250. His final average in that span, age 234. Average of 234 with a 702 OPS. So an OPS plus, he was negative. He averaged 14 home runs a year. He averaged less than 3 stolen bases a year. And he finally retired after 1 year with Colorado where he hit under 150. And I think he had 1 extra base hit in 50 plate appearances. And they finally went ahead and, he went ahead and retired. And this feels like he has a good chance to get in. The thing to remember about the contemporary era committee and what's new this year is there's you have to receive 75% of the votes. So you have to get 12 of the 16 votes to make it in. But also, these guys are limited in how many players they can vote for. And you have to receive, you have to receive 3 votes, maybe, to stay on this ballot the next time this era comes around. And the ballot has a lot of players that are going to get a lot of attention, especially because these voters, some of them are former players and executives, and they're voting on their peers, right? Barry Bonds is on this ballot. Roger Clemens is on this ballot. Carlos Delgado, Don Mattingly, Gary Sheffield, Fernando Valenzuela. And you can only vote for 4 players. You can't vote for everybody. So that's one of the issues here that we're kind of worried about for Dale Murphy. I genuinely think this is the year, which means I incredibly regret not being at the winter meetings. But we'll see. And there's a couple mentions in the chat here about Andrew Jones. I do want to talk about Andrew Jones real quick. There is some off the field concerns for Andrew Jones. We'll get to those in a minute or two. But that's commonly been cited as something that can keep guys out of the Hall. Dale Murphy's never gotten the flip side of this, right? He's never gotten the flip side of he's considered to be one of the best ambassadors of the game, both when he played and now. And so if we're going to hold behavior off the field against certain players, which is a slippery slope anyway, it feels like it's time for the Braves or for Dale Murphy to get the benefit of the doubt in these situations. On the notes on Andrew Jones, one of the, clearly, we've all kind of talked about this, greatest defensive outfielder of all time. There's been a lot of other very famous center fielders who have said that themselves. And you're right, he does have off-field considerations that are negative, that do hurt him. The biggest arguments against Andrew Jones are, one, the off-the-field stuff, but I believe it was a domestic violence issue plus the accusation of using performance-enhancing drugs. Not to the level of like a Bonds and everybody, but there were some rumors there about it. That's one thing. The other thing that gets held against Andrew Jones is the fact that he had a rapid fall off at the age of 30. From age 30 through age 35 when he retired, he hit 214 with a grand total of 92 home runs, like 15 a year. But what a lot of people who make that argument, I think, miss is Andrew Jones also debuted at the age of 19. And by the time he turned 21, he had, like, I just went and did the math yesterday. He had played 225 games by the time he turned 21. And so the done after 30 argument ignores the fact that he debuted less than 120 days after he turned 19. If he debuted at the age of 21 and was dominant from 21 to 32, I don't really think there would be a ton of argument there about Andrew Jones. And by dominant, I mean during his stretch from 1998 through 2006, he had an 860 OPS, a 119 OPS plus, hitting 270 with 319 home runs, 35 a year. He won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He won 10 consecutive Gold Gloves in center field. He literally won a decade's worth of Gold Gloves and nobody else won one. He was a 5-time MVP vote getter, including a runner-up one year. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-time All-Star. It's very hard to argue that he was not one of the most dominant players in that decade. If we put Ozzie Smith in the Hall of Fame for defense, it's really hard to not put Andrew Jones in the Hall of Fame for defense. Yes, there were accusations of PEDs. He never failed a test. I also don't believe they were doing a ton of testing in the earlier part of his career, but he still never failed a test. And there was accusations of domestic violence. I don't believe he was ever convicted of that or maybe even charged. I have to look more into that story. But either way, Dale Murphy, we hopefully find out Sunday night he was elected. And then Andrew Jones, we'll find out later in the offseason about whether or not he is elected. Quick update from the chat. Thank you to PJ's Braves. Each committee member gets a maximum of 3 votes, not 4. And you need to get votes from 5 different, you need to be on 5 ballots to continue the next time this committee comes around. So shout out to PJ's Braves in the chat for checking that for us. We appreciate that. That's why you guys are the best. In just a minute, let's talk about the draft lottery. I want to talk about the outcomes for the Braves, the logistics on how this works, and the stakes here for Atlanta, and then we'll take your questions. We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsey Crosby here with you live on Friday the 5th. Shout out to Bandit for taking a nap right now. We always love that. Okay, so part of the whole thing here with the draft lottery is with the winter meetings, it's going to be the draft lottery. On Tuesday is when this is actually held. We get the results at 5:30 p.m. It's a televised show, I believe on MLB Network, Tuesday at 5:30. They actually do it a little bit earlier in the day, and they sequester everybody who's in the room until that news actually comes out. The way that this works is, if you've ever seen a lottery drawing where there's the pin, like the ping pong ball machine, they genuinely use one of those for the draft lottery. Each team has a ping pong ball with a number on it that corresponds to theirs. I believe it's in the order of the odds. So Atlanta should have number 6 on their ping pong ball. And the machine, they draw 4 numbers from the ping pong ball, and the combination of those corresponds to a specific team. And they've done all of the math to make sure that all of these, that every single combination is covered and that every team has the proper odds. It's not just like if they draw number 6, Atlanta gets a pick. It's a 4 ping pong ball system. If you're a subscriber to Baseball America, JJ Cooper, the executive editor, is in the room every year and always writes a really good article about it. So definitely check that out if you're a subscriber. He has a lot of the inside details on how it works. Again, a lot of the teams are not usually in that room because anybody that's in that room is sequestered and held aside until the actual announcement happens. Atlanta's odds right now of getting the number 1 overall pick are not great. And because it goes by order of finish and by record, there are a couple teams that aren't in there. The Rockies aren't in there. The Angels aren't in there. The Nationals aren't in there because there's rules about being in their consecutive seasons and things like that. Atlanta has a 4.54% chance of getting the number 1 overall pick. The White Sox, 27.7. The Twins, 22.1. Pirates, 16.8. Orioles, 9.2. A's, 6.5. So Atlanta doesn't have the best odds of getting the number 1 overall pick. If I remember right from doing the math, Atlanta's odds of being in the top 6 are just under 50%. And as a reminder, this whole thing here, to answer the question in the chat, is done as an anti-tanking provision, right? If you intend to be as bad as possible to get the number 1 overall pick, you may not get the number 1 overall pick. There was a season just recently where Cleveland and Cincinnati kind of barely missed the postseason, and they had the top 2 picks because they won the lottery. So they are choosing the top 6 selections. After those 6 selections, they will then slot all of the remaining non-playoff teams by order of finish. So what could really be bad is Atlanta could be as bad, like as low as number 12. If everything breaks the wrong way, every team that's picked in the lottery had worse odds than Atlanta, and then the teams from in front of them have to get slotted in, Atlanta could be as low as 12th, but they could be as high as 1st. And the issue here is there's a significant dollar difference in those picks, right? Number 1 overall pick, last year, the slot value was $11.08 million. Those go up by about 2 to 3%. It varies based on national MLB revenues and how much they change. So probably 11.25 is the number 1 overall pick this year. Number 12 last year was about $5.75 million. And so it's more than double from 12 to 1. So we'll find out again on Tuesday night. I'll probably do a short right away. I'm willing to bet you Wednesday's show is going to be all about what Atlanta can do with the pick that they now have. And if they get early enough in the lottery, they could potentially have 3 picks in the top 50. Shout out to the Discord. The last time they had 3 picks in the top 50 was, I believe, the Kobe Allard draft. So it would be nice for the Braves to have 3 picks in the top 50 again. Want to see what happens there. But again, that will be done on Tuesday. We get the results 5:30 p.m. Eastern is the show. And again, I will do probably both a podcast and a newsletter about Atlanta's options after that. Go ahead. If you're here live on YouTube, one, thank you for being here on a Friday. If you're snowed in, I'm glad I could give you something to do. If you have any questions about the winter meetings, about my experiences there, about what happens, all of that, drop them in the chat, or just questions about the Braves in general. We'll get to those in the third segment. But while I'm kind of doing that, other stuff that's going to happen at the winter meetings, one of the big things is managers and GMs both address the media. And if it's the same as the winter meetings that I've gone to, which I believe it will be, typically what happens is the managers are spaced out throughout Monday and Tuesday. You get there Sunday, you don't really do a lot of stuff on Sunday. It's kind of a check-in. get situated and everything. And then on Monday is when all the stuff actually happens. But you can go and sit in on other manager press conferences. I expect when Walt Weiss addresses the media, we won't get actual schedule on this until Sunday when you check in. I expect Walt Weiss to be asked a little bit about what he wants to do differently, right? Probably going to be asked about, he's mentioned it on radio interviews, but how much does he plan to rotate guys through and give guys days off? Matt Olson's not a guy you're going to give a day off to, but everybody else, right? So who are you going to give days off to? How are you going to do it? How aggressive are you going to be about that? Probably going to be asked about the coaching staff. As far as I've seen, Walt Weiss has not done media since they've hired the coaching staff. And unlike when they hired Tim Hires, I got to find a way to rephrase that. Unlike when the Braves brought on Tim Hires, they did not make Jeremy Hefner available to the media. We had a press conference and we spent about 30 minutes talking to Tim Hires when he was brought on. And so it's, I'm a little curious as to why we didn't get a chance to talk to Jeremy Hefner, but I'm excited to see what Walt Weiss says about the makeup of his coaching staff. A lot of these guys have connections with each other. Was that deliberate? How much of that was driven by AA and Weiss versus driven by some of these guys getting in and then bringing on other guys that they know? Like, who was the inspiration to hire all of these guys that knew each other, right? And what is he most excited about? Honestly, I kind of keep going back and forth between Jeremy Hefner. I've been a fan of what he does with pitchers for a couple of years now. I'm an amateur pitching nerd, right? So throwing multiple fastballs, all that kind of stuff are things that we're used to, or, and things that I've always kind of liked. Antoine Richardson is a savant at base running. He is so good at getting guys to be fantastic base runners. And so I'm really curious to see who does Walt Weiss think is going to be the biggest beneficiary of Antoine Richardson at first base? Because the easy answer is Ronald Acuna Jr., but we saw him in 2023. He can steal bases without Antoine Richardson. Maybe he'll be more efficient, but he can already do it. Who's the guy that we're not thinking about who is going to pop off a 20 stolen base season under Antoine Richardson's tutelage? Or more. Juan Soto had 30-something, and he's slow as dirt. So really kind of like Matt Olson's the one that I want to see. Lav, drop it in the chat real quick. Matt Olson would be the funniest possible option. I honestly kind of think that Austin Riley, he's underrated from a speed perspective. And if he's fully healthy, especially if he's not getting the power that we're hoping he gets back to, right? In the mid to upper 30s, we definitely, you need to find other ways for Austin Riley to contribute and score runs. His sprint speed last year, 28.2 feet per second, 73rd percentile in baseball. I have not pulled the full list of every third baseman. I would be willing to bet Austin Riley is in the top third for sprint speed among third basemen last year. I'm going to try to get to it real quick while I'm talking. He was actually 16th in sprint speed. That surprises me a little bit. So there you go. Some of these were part-time players, though. Buddy Kennedy did not actually play a lot at third base for the Dodgers. So some of these are part-time guys. Maximo Acosta had 18 total competitive runs for the Marlins. He probably doesn't count. So I'm going to say Riley's, top 13, top 15, whatever I might be. He's the guy I'd love to see. But it is possible that some of the issue last year was he was dealing with that abdominal injury. Hey, Bandit, just be quiet, buddy. Okay. And so we'll see what happens. I'm curious to see what Walt Weiss says about that. We're also going to get to hear from Alex Anthopoulos. Unlike the managers who are kind of scheduled at different times throughout the 2 days, the GMs, if it's anything like the winter meetings I've attended before, the GMs do their media availability at the same time, right? When I was in Nashville, for instance, the day of the draft lottery, when that was over, we had a giant ballroom that was the media workroom. Everybody's in there with their laptops set up. You just picked a spot, and that's where you were for 4 days, right? After the draft lottery, like 30, 45 minutes afterwards, all of the GMs walked into the room at the same time. And everybody just went to spots on the wall away from everybody else. You kind of just huddled around your GM and you had a conversation. So there's usually not going to be a ton of video from that simply because it's hard to hear in that room. It's not impromptu. They tell you like they're going to come in here after this meeting's wrapped. But for the most part, it is a pretty quick process, right? Shout out to Jake Mastriani, host of Locked On Braves, my good friend. Some fun news coming on that, by the way, next week. So thanks for the kind words, Jake. Appreciate that. But you guys dropped a ton of questions here in the chat. Let me know if you have any more real quick. We're going to go to break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some of your biggest questions heading into the winter meetings, whether it's the draft, the offseason, who needs to sign to get the market going. We'll do all that next right here on Braves Today. Final segment of Braves Today, Lindsey Crosby. Let's get to your questions because there's some good stuff here. And I think the first one, I'm going to give him the first question because he answered a question because he looked it up for us earlier. PJ's Braves, which player needs to sign to start the dominoes falling for other signings? I really believe that this is Kyle Schwarber. There's clearly one of the best power hitters the last couple of years, and Philly wants to bring him back. They love the leadership. They love the power, all of that stuff. But the Reds are reportedly also making a run at him. He is the easiest and most logical source of adding power to your team. Some people are going to say Pete Alonso. For me, Schwarber is in a different category than Alonso because you're not going to be expected to sign Schwarber for 7 years, right? He's probably asking for something between 3 to 5 years. And he is very clear that, like, he is perfectly fine being a DH, right? Pete Alonso is willing to spend time at DH if he needs to, but he still wants to be a first baseman. And defensively, he's not a good first baseman. So Kyle Schwarber is the most obvious source of elite power available in the market. He's the most logical source if you don't want to sign anyone long-term. And so because of that, there are a bunch of teams that do not want to pivot to something else until they figure out, is Kyle Schwarber an option for our team? So I really feel like he's probably going to sign sooner rather than later. He's been considered a really good clubhouse guy. And if I remember right from while he was in Philly, he actively helps recruit other players. It's kind of like in college, your recruiting class, you try to get the quarterback in first, and the quarterback usually helps recruit other guys into your class. Similar here. I genuinely think Schwarber's the guy that is going to get this whole thing going. And I do think that he probably needs to sign, and he'll probably do it sooner rather than later, simply so that you can get like the rest of the market going. You can get your team filled out. So thanks, PJ's Braves, for the question. Timothy, related question. Do you think the meetings could open the floodgates on signings and trades? I've been really amazed this year at what feels like how quickly the market has been moving compared to previous off seasons. I think when you saw the Boris guys all take a long time to get their deals in, was it 2 off seasons ago? And how some of them, most of them had to take short-term deals. I feel like that was kind of a little bit of a learning situation. And Kyle Tucker is the star of this class, but there's not that guy that you obviously have to wait. The entire market's waiting on, like you had Shohei Ohtani 2 years ago and like you had Juan Soto last year. Yes, a lot of people want to see what's going to happen to Kyle Tucker, but at the same time, I don't think he's in the same caliber as those guys because of the injury history. And so I do think that the meetings we're going to see more guys sign in and around the meetings. We'll probably see a big signing this weekend. I think we'll see a couple come right out of the meetings, maybe during the meetings. And similar note coming here from Lav, do the trades usually start at the winter meetings or are they usually finalized there? From what I understand, the GM meetings we had about 2 weeks ago, that's where a lot of trades start to pick up momentum. And the bigger the trade is, typically the longer it takes. But I feel like the winter meetings, this is the first time since the GM meetings that you've been in the same place with all of those other GMs. And so you have a lot of preliminary conversations at the GM meetings, just, chatting at the hotel bar, you're in each other's suite, whatever. Your respective front offices go back and work on this stuff. Back in your city, you do proposals back and forth, and then at the winter meetings, you can sit down and actually finish the deal. And we've seen deals get done at the winter meetings. I was asleep in Nashville on Sunday night when the Jared Kelenic deal happened. My roommate woke me up so I could go write a story or two on the Jared Kelenic deal, and then I went back to bed. So I feel like last year kind of the exception, but we usually see a trade or two finalize at the winter meetings and kind of get going. But I do think, kind of answering these two questions, I do think the winter meetings this year will be busier than normal. A lot of the people I've talked to have also said that same thing. So definitely a factor that I expect to see done. And to Joe's point, more stuff gets done at the hotel bar than the actual meetings. He is not wrong. I have walked through, whether it's in the morning, I ran into Brian Sitker and somebody else having coffee, and it ended up like that was meaningful, right? So like it's the bar, it's coffee. You don't sleep a ton at the winter meetings. There's a lot of networking opportunities, walking around talking to folks, whether it's media folks. I met Jeff Passan. He's always wearing that suit. Apparently, if he's ever out in public, he's wearing a suit. It's wild. But like, there's just people around all the time. So there's that. Kind of keep going here with some of the offseason stuff. Is AA already done for this offseason? I really don't think he is. I'm taking AA at his word when he says they want to add a shortstop, they want to add starting pitching, and they know they need numbers for the bullpen. Now, do I think that it's a big addition via free agency? I don't necessarily know. I think we've all kind of come to the conclusion that it's not really worth popping a qualifying offer because you lose the 26 overall pick. You lose almost $3.5 million if you do that. So I really struggle with the idea of signing a qualifying offer guy. I do think that you do probably bring in a free agent, but unless you're bringing in Tetsuya Imai, the biggest acquisition is probably not your free agent. I do feel like the biggest acquisition probably ends up being a trade. I'm still holding out hope that Byron Buxton is that trade. We talked about this the other day. He has confirmed that he would waive his no trade clause to come to Atlanta. Other teams he would also supposedly waive it for, but we know Atlanta would be a thing. He is building a new house in Baxley, rather large house. Somebody sent me a video of that. And so I do think he comes. I don't know what the trade compensation would be. There's a question here from Mark about signing Pete Fairbanks. I love the idea of a 2-year deal with a club option, right? And then a Buxton trade. Owen Murphy, J.R. Ritchie, Nacho Alvarez, Alex Lodis. It feels like an expensive package. I think if it's truly open to any team and you have to win that trade, that package is a little more likely. But we have to remember that Buxton does have a no trade clause, and he does have the ability to say who he will waive that no trade clause and who he will not waive that no trade clause for. And so if Buxton uses his leverage, it's a smaller package than this. I think the only way that you end up with a package this size with this many rated prospects, right? Murphy, Ritchie are top 5 prospects for you. Lodis is, I believe, in a lot of top 10s right now. I think the only way you see a package this large is either A, if you're also trying to get Pablo Lopez or Joe Ryan. And I think Lopez would be more realistic there because that would shed more money off of Minnesota's payroll. Or if you genuinely had to win that trade offer competing against the Dodgers or competing against the Mets and all of these other teams. So hopefully the package is not that big. Bringing in Pete Fairbanks, he's actually one of the guys that's rumored to be signing pretty quickly, that he could be signed as soon as this weekend or early in the meetings. And if you remember from, I think it was 2 days ago, I talked about how a lot of the reliever signings already have been guys that rate really highly in Stuff Plus. I think he had the 5th best Stuff Plus amongst the reliever group in free agency this year. So we've already seen number 2 sign. We've seen number 3 sign. We've seen number 6 sign. I think we saw number 4 sign as well. And he would be another guy in that group that really good Stuff Plus would sign early in free agency. From Matt, ideal offseason for the Braves with specific players. Honestly, I think your ideal offseason would be Byron Buxton, Ha-Seong Kim. And then for the pitcher, it could be Pablo Lopez. I am not as worried about Tatsuya Imai not working out as a lot of other people are. I do think worst case scenario, he's a very expensive reliever, but I do think Tatsuya Imai, Pablo Lopez, either one of them is fine. The more that I think about it, the more I don't necessarily want to go for a veteran who can give you a lot of innings. I know that innings are valuable. Alex Anthopoulos clearly values innings, even from prospects. I have an article coming up, Braves Today, a newsletter early next week about some of Atlanta's missteps with prioritizing quantity of innings over quality of innings. But for me, give me Byron Buxton, give me Ha-Seong Kim so that you can best deploy Mauricio Dubon, use that defensive versatility. And then a starting pitcher, maybe a reliever if Joe Jimenez is not ready. And I think you're good. I think you're set. I don't think you have to do anything crazy here. I think that's probably good enough. Last couple questions here. If we miss out on the shortstops in the draft, who is your number one option? For me, it comes down to Drew Burress or Derek Curiel, the outfielders. Drew Burress from Georgia Tech, Curiel from LSU. I know Jake from Locked On Braves is in the chat. I believe he said he was a fan of Drew Burress. I'm trying to remember. I get really nervous about signing up for a 5'9" outfielder, a power-hitting 5'9" outfielder. Part of me just really worries that a lot of that is a product of the metal bat. I know he's a local kid. I just really, if it came down to that situation, I would much rather get Derek Curiel, who looks the part, versus a guy like Drew Burress, who has the production, but I'm worried not having the background info, right? Not having all of the detailed data on everything, that he is a little bit of a metal bat, smaller ballpark master versus being sustainable at the major league level with what he does, right? A couple other quick questions here. Timothy asked, do we lose a pick if Ha-Seong Kim comes back? We do not. He does not have a qualifying offer. He was not eligible for a qualifying offer because he changed teams in the season. Jake confirmed he's not a Burris guy. So sorry about that, Jake. I told you I couldn't remember. I wasn't sure. Jake confirms he's not a Burris guy. You can come on. We'll talk about this next week once we know what the draft class is or what the draft pick is. But you do not lose a pick for Ha-Seong Kim. If he were to pick up the player option, you could have gave him a qualifying offer on the way out the door, which I think is part of the reason why he did not pick up the player option. He'd be entering an offseason into a lockout with a qualifying offer attached unless he was terrible. So I think that's probably a reason why they didn't do that. One of the last questions here from Gator Fanatic, is that package a lot to give up for Buxton, who is injury prone? Getting Byron Buxton is going to be a risk for anybody that does that because he has missed a lot of time in his career. Now, I will say the last 2 seasons, he's been over 100 games in both seasons. And so because of that, the question is either has he gotten better able to not to not get injured while playing his way? Has he learned, like, has it been a training thing? Has it been a conditioning thing? Has it been better load management? I do think the Braves are uniquely positioned to mitigate the workload of Byron Buxton, simply because, barring Michael Harris's bat, you have 3 starting outfielders already. You don't need Byron Buxton to play the most demanding outfield position of center field every single day. You can rotate him through left field. You can rotate him through right field. You can rotate him through center field if you want to. You can give him DH days. If you acquire Buxton, the way that I see this working is Michael Harris plays in center field most days, maybe not against the hardest lefties. Byron Buxton rotates right field and left field and DH with those guys. He starts in right, Acuna's the DH. Then he starts in left, and Profar's the DH. Then Buxton goes to DH, right? And so by doing that, you can give him a bunch of half days. You can mitigate the wear and tear on his legs by, 1, not having him in center field every day, and 2, not having him in the field every day. So I do feel like, yes, it is a risk. It's maybe not as much of a risk for Atlanta as it would be another team who would need him to play center field every day or play in the field every day. Like LA, if the Dodgers trade for him, you can't put him at DH. Shohei's there. They need him in center field because Andy Pages is fine. He's not great. So it's a little bit of a different scenario for Atlanta versus somebody else. Guys, doing a live show is a ton of fun. I really enjoy doing this. Thank you to everybody who's been here. Do me a favor. If you're listening on audio, 5-star review would be fantastic. Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, so you know when we drop shorts, bonus episodes, we go live, all that kind of stuff. And a little bit of something special coming early next week to announce something with Jake, a collaboration we're doing together. We'll talk more about that next week. Until next time, thank you for being here. Have a good weekend. And this has been Braves Today.